Now, the Islamic system also allows us to, through the Sharia, to create special zones. As you can see, there's the Hema, which is special conservation zones. And in fact, in Zanzibar, we created a 2,000 square kilometer conservation zone, which the fishermen then looked after. So there are these other zones as well. I'll rush you. How much time have I got? How much time have I got? 5 minutes, okay. 5 to 8 minutes. Okay. So we have special systems where you can have a community or the state can say, I demark that area as a forest conservation zone, or that area as a marine conservation zone. There are things like land reclamation projects, which somebody revives land, you can claim ownership from the state for it. There are things like the endowment projects, like we call it the awqaf, the waqf projects. For example, there is an endowment in Mecca to protect stray dogs. There have been endowments in Islamic lands in Turkey. There is a place, there is a meadow that is reserved in the spring for bees only. No human beings, no animals can graze on that land. It's reserved for bees so that they can do their work. So it can get quite specialized. Step 3. Then we also have a process of accountability and adjudication, where people being people, they will break the rules, and there is a process by which people can then complain to a special adjudicator and get matters resolved. Then there is also, again, going back to the Zanzibari model, the technical parameters that we cannot ignore. For example, the fishermen were told that you can only fish in these seasons. Your nets have to be big because the small fish can escape and grow. And so together with these, we work with the secular agencies and introduce the technical parameters as well. Again, I have come to the conclusion. You see, it could also be said, if I may speak for the other faiths as well, that the whole business of environmentalism is new. It's a reaction to what has been happening. You see, but if you go to, I have finally come round to the conclusion that it is about behavior. It is about how we treat each other. It is about showing concern for each other. You see, and the best behavior comes from the prophets. And if you follow their example, without talking about environmentalism or the environment, you've done your job, because it is about being kind to each other, kind to the animals, kind to the earth. And if you follow these examples, you don't need to construct a special environmental project or a subject on these issues. But given where we are, and given that we have to deal with the kind of issues that the secular world has created for us, and we have created for ourselves, then we have to go in and produce an ethics basis, an action basis, and an accountability basis to deal with these issues. Now, I'm also pleased to say that we haven't been, I've been also active in an organization called the Alliance of Religions and Conservation since the early 1990s. And I had the privilege of being invited to chair a conference which was held in Japan in 1995 to put together a statement which eventually became known as the Ohito Declaration for Religion, Land and Conservation, Ohito being the place where we met. And there were 9 of us belonging to 9 different faith traditions. We were locked up in a room, and it took us 8 days to come up with these, 10 spiritual principles and 10 recommended course of actions. And I would just like to, I don't want to read through all that, I'd just like to emphasize 2. The 4th one is environmental understanding is enhanced when people learn from the examples of prophets and of nature itself, emphasizing what I said earlier on. In fact, if you follow the examples of our teachers, then you really don't need another set of principles saying, this is environmental education. The basic teachings are still there. People of faith should give more emphasis to the higher quality of life in preference to a higher standard of living. You see the dichotomy, the contradiction, the conundrum we have. Do you want a higher quality of life? Or follow the example of Bhutan. What do they say? It's not GDP, it's the gross domestic, sorry? No, the Bhutanese, who knows about this? The Bhutanese talked about the gross domestic happiness. Yes, yeah. I mean, that's a good example to follow. There are examples that we can follow, but what I'd like to emphasize mostly is that, which I tell my Muslim scholars, the Muslim leaders, we have to, which is the first point in the recommended courses of action, call upon religious leaders to emphasize environmental issues within religious teachings. Faith should be taught and practiced as if nature mattered. I don't know about the Jewish and the Christian faith, but it does not happen in the Islamic tradition. It's not taught that God's creation is who you are, and the rest of everything you see is creational, and that you have a responsibility within it. As you know, we have the five pillars, and we follow the 5 pillars. But I say to the scholars, this is not enough. If I may conclude my presentation, Chairman, I would just like to say that this, as I see, is the most important thing, because we need to then go back to the drawing board and see how we conduct the religious education process and prioritize the whole environmental issue by teaching children and saying to them, what is most important to you is to know that you are not only God's creation, but you are part of a bigger entity, which is the natural world. Thank you very much.